There's an article in the Daily Mail where the family of one of the victims is accusing the Democratic mayor of gaslighting the entire city after dismissing claims that a serial killer is behind dozens of bodies pulled from the bayou. So, the family of a man found dead in the Houston bayous has accused the city's mayor of gaslighting after the Democrat dismissed almost 50 bodies pulled from the waters in 21 months. And John Whitmire said it was basically because of homelessness. He rejected growing fears that there's a serial killer dumping bodies in Texas waterways after dozens have been found dead over the last 2 years. So, one death that has baffled the investigators is Kenneth Cutting Jr. He was 22 years old. He disappeared after a night out in downtown Houston in June 2024. His cousin Lauren Friedman said his body was found by police in the Buffalo Bayou a few days later, about a mile and a half upstream of where his roommates last saw him alive. The cause and manner of the young man's death were undetermined by autopsy, and they found no traces of physical injury or drug use. So this is, one where the family is saying that it's possibly someone killed him, and possibly the murders are related, and that there could be a serial killer on the loose in Houston, and they're wanting the city of Houston and the Houston Police Department to take all this serious, right? And there have been multiple bodies discovered in the local bayous. At least 22 of them have been found in Harris County bayous so far in 2025. That's a lot. And according to the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, which is the medical examiner's office, only 6 have been considered to have a confirmed cause of death. There's 4 drownings, and 3 were accidental. 1 was a suicide. 1 they're thinking was a cardiac-related death. Victims are mostly male. There's been 19 men, 3 women, a mixture of black, white, and Hispanic. So there's no clear type that's being murdered here. And the bodies have been found in several bayous, like Buffalo Bayou, White Oak Bayou, Brays Bayou, Greens Bayou. Now, what really ignited this fire of public concern is in mid-September of this year, about five bodies were found in 1 week, and that created a strong public speculation of a serial killer at large. Sometimes serial killers escalate, right? And the fear was that this was the result of an escalation. Social media has amplified these fears with many content creators and users connecting to death. There's a lot of people out there saying, that are taking all this data and saying this is evidence of a serial killer. But I caution people, because there's so many people out there that are trying to over dramatize stories to get engagement, right? Just understand, sometimes you're being informed and sometimes you're being entertained, and you can't confuse the two. John Whitmire, the mayor of Houston, and No Diaz, the Houston police chief, have both stated repeatedly there is no evidence these deaths are connected or the work of a serial killer. Officials emphasize the context. Houston has over 2,500 miles of waterways, and many homeless individuals live near these bayous, and many deaths historically are by drowning or they're accidental in these waters. But there's data gaps. Many of these bodies, the cause of death is still pending or undetermined. But listen, one of the problems is when a body is in the water and it's recovered, it's really hard to get forensic. There's a lot of damage done just by being in the water, and other things are in the water. I don't want to get too graphic, but when they pull some of these bodies out, it's not like it's a pristine forensic situation that they can follow clues on. It is tough, and let's face it, a lot of these unknowns are going to stay unknown. People are equating that as saying it's a cover-up, but I'm just saying, understand that when you pull a body from the water, it's just not a perfect forensic situation. Authorities are investigating each case individually, and they're not publicly linking them. There are significant unknowns in this story, and that's fueling this concern of speculation. The majority of the cases have an undetermined cause of death, like 16 out of 22 in one report, meaning we lack basic forensic conclusions. The demographics, the circumstances, the locations vary. There's not obviously a single mode, there's not a single victim profile, there's not the same cause of death, it's not the same location. Some details, there's some men, some women, different age groups, different bios. Uh, that does not scream serial killer. In the past, serial killers tend to have a certain type that they become obsessed with, and they have certain methods that they get better at and they refine. And this is almost like a shotgun approach. It's all demographics, it's all age groups, it's all races, and it's in a variety of locations. If this is a serial killer, it is unlike any that we've seen yet. There is public frustration and distrust, and some residents believe the authorities are not providing full data. They're wanting to know, well, what if the body was in the water for 2 days? Well, what happened, in that time frame? And no one knows, and that's where it gets really tough, because once the body's in the water, a lot of forensic data is lost. One thing that does remain unclear is why there seems to be more bodies this year versus last year. So far, there's been 22 bodies just in 25. In 2024, there was 24 for the whole year, right? So we're already, let's say we're 75% of the way through, but we're like 95% with the body count. So there's been an escalation in body count, and there hasn't been a good explanation about why. Like, why is it ramped up? Is it something to do with the homeless population? Is there a variable there? But it does seem to be speeding up, and that until they can give people answers, you're going to have speculation. These press conferences that Mayor Whitmire is having, where he's just dismissing it, is getting people to distrust because of the past issues with HPD. I went over that in a previous video, but basically, there's been evidentiary issues, but a lot of cases got basically thrown out over that. At the University of Houston downtown, Dr. Krista Gehring is a criminology professor, and she's confirming that the pattern doesn't match a typical serial killer, and the causes of death aren't uniform, the victims aren't uniform, the locations are varied. I understand the concern and why you could come up with a theory, but when you start looking at the specifics, the serial killer approach doesn't make sense, right? The data points suggest a pattern of elevated deaths, but we don't know what is causing an elevation in deaths. Is it is it just population related? Do we have a surge in homeless population, and that's resulting in higher deaths because a certain amount of that population does die and end up in the bayous every year? The fact that so many causes are still pending is critical. Like they need to close these out. Drawing conclusions is premature, but they need to tell us, was this a homicide? Was this a drowning? And understand one thing. If there's probably, like I'm trying to state the facts here as I've gathered them, but I'm also trying to tell you that on social media, a lot of these influencers, and I'm here on social media making a video, right? So I'm right there with them. But a lot of times they will push to the dramatic. They will try to induce fear because that gets clicks, that gets engagements, that gets followers. And I understand that dynamic, but it's misleading, right? And when people are relying on vocal people to give them a summary, I believe the onus is on us to really try to cut through the BS and talk about what's real. And that's my interest in this case. I live in Houston. I think it's fascinating because I wonder, like, is there a serial killer? Is the HBD just completely hiding all this, right? And I keep looking at the data, and I keep coming to my summaries is that I'm agreeing with like the criminology professor that it doesn't seem to fit a serial killer. Doesn't mean that there's not one that we haven't seen this MO before. Maybe this is something new. I don't know. But if it was a single actor, you'd expect similar victimology, similar cause and method of death. You'd have geographical clustering in a tighter area, and this it just isn't present here. So while I can understand that you might think it's a serial killer out there, and you might be afraid that it's a serial killer out there, it could be an artifact of the homeless population, the numbers surging. Houston's extensive waterways and bayous make accidental drownings and homeless, unhoused populations around the water. You combine that with substance use and mental health issues, it leads to these deaths. And the fact that previous years saw 24 bodies and this year's tracking similarly high could say this is a long-standing risk, right? Rather than a sudden serial killer outbreak. Like maybe this has been an issue for a long time, but a couple of people that have died, and I don't even want to speculate, like these families are hurt and they want answers and they want to know what happened to someone that they consider to be in fine health, and it doesn't make sense that they would drown. But it was after a night out, right? And maybe things don't always go great. And a couple high profile things like that thrown in with some routine issues, and the lines get blurred, right? The jump in occurrences, especially that 5 bodies in 1 week, that demands attention, no matter what your opinion is. Like that demands attention, but intensive searching and awareness and even reporting. I think like Houston news stations, maybe they need to take a better look at this, right? Instead of just alarming stories that show up in UK newspapers. And we need to take a look has the homeless population surged? Because that's what I'm wondering, right? Like, is there a substance use problem? Has something changed? With the borders locking down, is there a different domestic avenue that's opened up, and it's the homeless population is getting access to it? Like there's all these things that we as citizens we can't look at all this, but a news agency should be looking at this. The HPD should be looking at this, and when I say look at this, they should analyze it and give us a better theory than it's just a shoulder shrug, because the shoulder shrugs are really causing a lot of problems. So we need them to focus resources and tell us what the manner of death. There's too many unknowns out there. We need to look to see if a pattern does emerge. Right now, there's no pattern. But what if a pattern does emerge? We also need to look at the geographic clustering. Could it be that there's more than one serial killer? That's not foreign to this area of Texas. All along the Gulf Freeway, we had a situation where it was more than one, right? The killing fields. Laura Smothers, it wasn't just one guy, and that caused a lot of confusion in the investigation. Right now, it doesn't look like a single actor, but maybe we need to consider that there's more than one if we're going to consider that angle, right? But that's something that law enforcement and media needs to do. Forensic experts, criminology professors, they need to look at the clustering. Okay, overall, if you say that there's no geographic clustering and there's no data tie-ins, but what if all the murders or the bodies showing up in a certain bayou appear to be women or be a certain age or a certain race, and then over here in this bayou it's another cluster, right? Like maybe that could point to multiple serial killers. We need to focus resources on looking at that instead of just shrugging our shoulders and saying, no, it's not a serial killer. Like, why do you think it's not a serial killer? HPD needs to be more transparent with the time, the date, how the investigation is going. Because just remember, there's a lot of families affected, a lot of people out there. There's not a lot of information, and they're looking for information, right? And when these people are just being dramatic just to get clicks, it's causing real pain out there. But we've got a real problem in our community. We just need to understand what it is.